So yeah, a couple of the clubs got burned really badly. As I said, no one got burned more badly than Hertha. 5-2 against Schalke. I should have done this. This was homework, but I was extremely busy yesterday, hanging out with LAFC and LA Galaxy here in California. So I didn't look up when the last time was when Schalke scored 5 goals. But I think the last time they scored came close was that Matthew Hoppe show in the year they got relegated. I think they won that game 4-0. 5-2. Wow. I know that neither one of us saw this coming because neither one of us tipped this result. I think we both actually thought that Hertha would probably walk away with the 3 points here, and they did
I said
not.
Schalke.
Oh, you
I
did
said
say
Schalke.
Schalke. Yes, you said 2-1 Schalke. So I'm in the doghouse. I said Hertha. Yes, so Schalke do get all 3 points, and they think they get it in a way that kind of might resurrect them in this relegation battle. I think what is true, and we both said this, and I think it holds even more true now, is that the team that would lose this relegation battle would be in enormous trouble. I think now that you add the manner of the defeat, the way Hertha completely collapsed here, and the fact that they then released Sandro Schwarz from his head coaching duties and replaced him with Pal Dardai, who's taking his 3rd comeback.
Did you think they just keep Pal Dardai in like a glass cabinet and then he'd got like a sign above it saying, in case of emergency, break glass?
And he just comes out. Yes.
And then after 6 months, he just kind of says, look, I'm going to go back to the youth team. You know, it's crazy. It keeps putting out fires for this club.
Yeah. I'm not sure it's going to work this time though, Stefan, because I followed the press conference this morning and read some of the details. And a few things stuck out to me. First of all, that Kevin Prince Boateng, who we were both baffled that he's actually still playing and that he's actually still an impact player for this team, which tells you quite a bit about Hertha Berlin and where they are as a club. That he's now part of the coaching staff, right? He's an assistant coach, which I actually think might be a pretty smart move by the club because he's obviously tied into the club. You know, he's a Hertha youth academy prospect from way back in the day. He identifies with the city of Berlin. His playing career is coming to an end. He does seem like the kind of person and personality that would do quite well as a head coach, I think, right? So maybe kind of shoehorning him into that position makes sense because he does have the personality to lead. I think maybe reading between the lines here, I think they were kind of actually maybe thinking of giving him the position altogether, but maybe didn't trust him to do it on his own. And I don't know what his coaching license status is, right? That's also an issue. So they did bring back Pal Dardai to sort of help him. We had actually a similar situation once before in the Bundesliga with Matthias Sammer and Udo Lattek. That was back in 2000 when the two of them saved Borussia Dortmund. And then the next year, Borussia Dortmund actually won the title with Matthias Sammer in charge. That's not going to happen here. I'm sorry, Hertha fans. I don't think Hertha is going to be anywhere near winning. Well, they could win the 2nd division title, I guess, with Kevin Prince Boateng in charge. But there is precedent for this, you know, where a player who is still kind of almost on the field walks straight into a head coaching position. I think that is an interesting thing here to note, but the Pal Dardai thing, I mean, that is not exactly the most creative solution, in my opinion, Stefan.
Yeah, it's not, but that's maybe not a bad thing. If you look at some of the creative decisions they've made recently at Hertha, they've been disastrous, you know. Jurgen Klinsmann's probably the most obvious example of that in recent years. And I don't know, I mean, look, first things first, you know, anyone taking this job on right now is really up against it to actually save Hertha from relegation. I mean, they've got Werder Bremen coming up. They've got Stuttgart, Cologne, Bochum. So there's maybe 3 or 4 games that they could win. Wolfsburg in the last day is also maybe a winnable game because Wolfsburg haven't looked exactly fantastic recently. But I don't know. I haven't really had much time to process this because we're literally recording this as Pal Dardai's press conference happened. But I've always quite liked Pal Dardai in the sense that he's always kind of been just this very low-key, club guy. He just gets on with his job. And actually, if you kind of look at his record at the club, his first stint at the club was actually quite impressive as a head coach. Yeah, I've got the transfer mark page open that shows all the previous head coaches, and in his first spell, he picked up 1.38 points per game, which nobody was able to match that came after him. And then actually, when he came back in 2021 as a kind of interim, but also full time, kind of like what we're seeing here, he picked up another respectable 1.23 points per game, which Korkut, Magat, and now Schwartz haven't been either. So I didn't really understand why he kind of gave up the job in the second time, because I actually thought he did a decent job of it. But I also kind of think, if Hertha are beginning to resign themselves to get relegated, I think Dardai is probably a good candidate to kind of take on the job in the second division. He obviously knows the club back to front. He also doesn't really come with a huge amount of expectation, like, if they were to appoint, I don't know, say like Adi Hutter or something like that. Not that they could get something like that, but I'm just thinking like some generic Bundesliga head coach is, maybe would arrive with all sorts of bells and whistles attached.
Yeah.
If it's Dardai, he can just kind of get on with the job without anyone really thinking, oh well, will he stay? Will he go? I mean, he's always going to stick around if they get relegated. He'll probably quite happily just do the job in the second division, and he'd probably do a reasonably good job of it as well if you kind of look at his previous records. I mean, that's kind of the problem with Hertha. It's not really the thing about Hertha, I think, is that like you kind of look at the decision makers there over the course of the years. Obviously, the ownership structure has changed a lot. The people who make decisions have changed a lot. Specifically this season, that's always been the problem. The people making decisions, the people paying or putting the money into the club, they've always been the people making the wrong problems. When the situation is, if they maybe just stuck with Dardai the first time around, or the second time around at least, they probably would have been quite comfortable in the Bundesliga now.
Yeah.
The kind of weird thing about this game, actually, having watched it, was that I didn't actually think Hertha played that poorly. Obviously, if someone's just kind of looking at that result on a score sheet, they'll think, wow, Schalke really battered Hertha.
Yeah.
But it wasn't really like that at all, really. It was a game that was 5-2 that could have very easily finished 3-3. If you look at the XG, Schalke had 2.58 to Hertha's 1.72. But I also think, crucially, Schalke scored two really, really important goals. First in the 3rd minute, then in the 48th minute. That just kind of completely pulled the wind out of Hertha's sails, because actually, Jovetic pulls one back when it was 2-0 to Schalke just for half time. It's on his 2-1. Hertha have their tails up, and then Schalke just deliver this another incredible blow. And I think I do kind of feel like I'm from a Schalke point of view, I actually don't think there's a huge amount they should read into this game, because even though it's a decent performance, I think they were quite lucky in the manner of both early goals in both halves, because it allowed them to sit back and play that kind of defensive counter-attacking role that they quite enjoy playing this season under Thomas Reis, and they were able to kind of pick off Hertha. But yeah, Hertha had a number of chances in this game, and it was actually quite an evenly matched game. So bizarrely enough, I'm not sure even. I don't really see the point in sacking Schwartz at this point.
And
I didn't actually think Hertha were particularly bad. If they played like that up against, as I mentioned, the likes of Werder Bremen or Cologne or Stuttgart, maybe Stuttgart's look better, but Poker or whatever else, then I don't think there's any suggestion that they could pick up points. So it's a weird situation at Hertha right now, as it has been for a long time now. They seem kind of destined to get relegated, but hey, maybe a stint in this 5 Bundesliga would be a bad idea.
I mean, we said the same thing about last year when they brought in Felix Magath, right? And he did turn things around, got them into that 16th spot, and then rescued them in the relegation battle against HSV. I'm not sure they're going to be quite that lucky this year. I'm just looking really quickly at the table here, and it's it is only 2 points to Stuttgart, who are on that 16th spot, and that is probably the best bet now. To somehow just get to pray to be 16th and then, have a repeat against HSV, as it looks like. When you look at the second division results, HSV doing everything in their power to finish 3rd. Very lucky, I think, that St. Pauli also slipped, because then otherwise the derby, the Hamburg derby would have been a really big one, right? This weekend, this upcoming weekend. But obviously now Hertha, their 16th spot is their biggest hope, because 5 points with just 6 games to go to Bochum, I think is a really tough task. I thought it was interesting that Dardai mentioned a few of the fundamentals that are really important for him, right? And when he rescued the club last time, that they really need to get back into getting set pieces right, just be defensively sound, just do the basics. And I think that is probably a really good message from him, right? Just think match day to match day, get your job done, focus on the things that you can control, that sort of thing. And it's a very clear message. And I think also for him, as you said, he doesn't really have anything to lose. If they go down, worst case, he just goes back to his youth academy job, right? Which he seems to be enjoying the most anyways, and can just do that. Like, it's like, he's almost unfireable in a sense, right? Like, he has a job at Hertha. He will always have a job at Hertha. Every once in a while he pops up, break it emergency kind of guy. What I think is, and this is maybe my final thought on this, how does 777 feel about that? The new American partners that have just come in and bought the stake and took the stake over from Lars Windhorst for a lot of money, and also guaranteed more investment to come in, right? And I mean, again, we're just taking this all in as it happens, right? So this might require a deeper analysis further down the road, but how are they going to look at this mess that was presented to them, this prospect of second division football next year? And how will that influence investment into the club? And I think that is a big part of the story here that, we still need to digest, because you look at some of the other teams. I think with the Italian club Genoa, I think they had a similar situation as well. But yet, it is fascinating to watch, because for them to get something back for their money, you have to play first division football, right? You look at the television money, you look at the attendance figures and all that. It's just, and like next year you also don't have what rescued them the last time they went down, is that they had the derbies against Union Berlin, right? They wouldn't have that this time, because Union Berlin are doing quite well in the Bundesliga. And then that's a risk as well, because like, you go down now, you lose further ground to the other team in Berlin that's slowly but surely usurping you as the number one club in the city, right? So I think that is a really fascinating part of the story that is yet to unfold. And I wonder how much of the decision to break the glass in case of emergency actually came from 7-7 partners.
Yeah, I mean, you would assume that they knew what they were getting involved with Hertha, because it's not like they've invested in, Gladbach or, I don't know, Frankfurt or something like that, and all of a sudden they've just had this historically bad season and found themselves in relegation. I mean, Hertha have been kind of bumbling around the bottom of the table for a number of years now. They finished 16th last season, 14th the year before that, 10th, 11th, 10th. Yeah, they had some decent runs in the top 6 and 8 back, two seasons, but a bit before that, there was 15th, 11th, 16th, and that's been their kind of yo-yo in between the first and second division. So historically, at least in a modern sense, Hertha are a club who can aspire to maybe be a mid-table Bundesliga side, or maybe aspire to even be a top 8 side, but for the most part, they are a team at the bottom half of the table who always have to deal with relegation. So it'll be a real test of these investors to see if they're genuine or if they're just here to try and make a quick buck, because if they're genuine, they'll look at relegation and say, well, it's not what we had planned, but it's not the end of the world, and maybe it offers an opportunity for them to kind of wipe the slate clean and build something proper. And you couldn't look for a better example in the sense of what Union Berlin have done, where they take things very slowly, they don't get ahead of themselves, they make sure they appoint the head coach first, and that head coach has a very strong say in what happens at the club, so that everything kind of revolves around that. And I think Union could do a lot of good just kind of looking towards, Hertha can do a lot of good rather looking at Union and just thinking, well, let's try and walk before we can run. And then before you know it, you are suddenly a top 6, top 4 side like Union Berlin, if you do manage to get your ducks in a row.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Oh, this is a developing story, so we'll probably keep our eyes on it and see how it develops. I'm pretty sure Hertha fans, I wish all the best. Their club is all of a sudden a spotlight for all the wrong reasons. Stefan, we have to move up the table and stay down the table, because